Welcome back to the second segment of Solace Show. Today is July 2nd, 2018. I am Dr. Robin Donaldson, co-founder of Solace Club, care package company for folks in grief. And today I have been talking with Dr. Cynthia Patterson, an incredible veterinarian, and we've been talking about pet loss. Pet loss is, and the statistics that Dr. Patterson, that you have mentioned to me today were so far beyond anything that I had even known. And so if we consider how many households have pets in them, and at some point these pets are going to die, it really makes me think of how important it is to prepare ourselves for that inevitability, to prepare our families for that. And, just listening to you talk in the first segment, I really appreciate all the work that you do. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit now about our tougher topic of that process and actual euthanasia. I don't know if you have any statistics on the percentage of pets that end up dying by euthanasia, not like, being put down in shelters or anything like that. That's a totally different topic, but pets. Do you have an idea about that?
Ooh, I don't have a specific
Okay.
number. That
Okay.
is a great question, but I would say the vast majority of owned pets, especially the ones that receive medical care on a regular basis, they are more likely to be humanely euthanized than to pass on their own. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think mostly it comes down to, as a profession, we have this gift of euthanasia. This is something
Right.
we can do for our friends to alleviate their suffering. And because we have that, it is an option for people, again, who maybe feel like they're watching their friends, their pets die a
Right.
slow death. We can kind of help them in a way that is not painful and is not scary for them.
Sure. So often I think that folks struggle with family members, struggle with, is it the right time? Is it too soon? Is it too late? What are your thoughts? What's your experience on that?
Yeah, I would say, if I had to think back, if a question I've had the most around this topic is, is it time, or when is it time? Or,
Right.
doctor, what would you do in this situation if you had to think about the timing of it? And I can say this, and this is what I've told most people. I have never, in my 20 years of doing this now, I've never had anyone say to me, I did this too soon. I made this decision too quickly. I wish I had made a different decision. But I can tell you, I've had countless families that after the fact, who've had time to reflect on what has happened, have said, I waited too long. Meaning, with this gift of humane euthanasia, being able to alleviate the suffering and seeing how peaceful that experience can be, they, in hindsight, felt like they had drawn out the suffering of their pet maybe for too long of a time period.
Sure.
And when we love our pets, then we again have pets as children replacements, whether we're millennials just starting life or we're empty nesters looking for someone to help fill our home.
Right.
And we lean on our pets. It's easy to want to hang on for as long as we possibly can.
Right.
Just like human medicine, there's been so many advances in veterinary medicine. We can keep pets with us for so long compared to a generation ago.
Well, sure. That's partly what I was about to say, and what I'm thinking is that, back in the day, there wasn't euthanasia, and pets just kind of died, and we watched them struggle. I wasn't alive back then. I've always had the option of euthanizing my pets, but I hear, and that is very tough to watch, especially when they're much more now our family members, our dear friends, and I think that we're able to, like you said, prolong their life. We give pets chemotherapy now. We perform surgeries on them, things that sustain our life their lives because we want them with us, and so it is natural that we would want them to stay with us. But you know what? They, as much as we are able to communicate and we can sink in, they don't have the human language to tell us what's wrong, to tell us how they're feeling, to tell us all those pieces. And I think that is definitely an element of what makes it more challenging.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's much like working with children. There's no great or very young children like pediatrics, babies. There's no effective way to communicate with, at least verbally, with our pets. Right. And so we have to rely on a lot of other cues. And obviously having a good relationship with a veterinary medical team to help make educated decisions about pain control, or any other medical condition that would need to be addressed. Those things are really important. But I would always tell families, especially if they would ask me what I would do, I say to them, the biggest thing, the most important thing is to realize they are with their pet 99% of the time. So they know their pet so well. No one knows them better. And in light of knowing their pet so well, they need to think of a few things that really establish a healthy quality of life for that pet. So I think of my cat, Mr. Boo, as he's getting older. I think, okay, what are the 5 things that sort of make him Mr. Boo, uniquely him, things that he really loves to do, whether he does them out of an obsessive compulsive routine or because he really enjoys them is questionable. But there are things that he does that none of my other cats have ever done. And so when I reflect on him and say, today was a great day for Mr. Boo because he got to sit in a ray of sunshine in this particular spot that he really likes to sit in. He got to play with one of his toys for a few minutes. He had a special treat that he really enjoys. He's napping in his favorite spot, actually right behind me right now. And, so I just kind of put Boo in context. And there will come a time where Boo will not be healthy anymore. He's only 13 now, but, that could be in a few months. It could be in 7 years. Right. And so I have to decide, okay, I need to monitor him for his behavior changes. And then to decide if he's not responding to pain control, or if he's not responding to, say, something to help him with chronic kidney disease, what is today a good day or a bad day for him? And so I would always ask families to keep a journal of good days and bad days. Keep a little calendar entry on the fridge if there are multiple family members involved in the key decision making around healthcare. Right. Because that way you don't feel like you're making a spontaneous decision to have a very permanent decision. I mean, you cannot go back from euthanasia. It is ultimately an end-of-life choice. But families who have done this and have felt like, okay, we've been monitoring our cat or our dog now for 6 months. It's been a long chronic process, and we finally gotten to the point where there's clearly more bad days than good days. It's time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, of course, I love data, the nerdy scientific brain that we have, and I think that definitely can help, because it can feel like you're having to make a decision in the moment, or if there's a crisis and you're in the vet's office and all that you can think of is what your cat is doing right then, right there. It is definitely helpful to have a record of, wait a minute, there have been more bad days. This has kind of been leading up to this crisis right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for a chronic illness, it's really helpful, especially if families struggle so much with the thought of making such a final decision. Obviously, when pets are in crisis, that's where really leaning on the medical advice that they're given in that moment is best, and sometimes it's a financial decision, and sometimes it's genuinely a situation where medically there's nothing else that we can do to alleviate the suffering of that pet. That's when sometimes more immediate decisions need to be made.
Sure.
And I always would tell my clients, if they make a decision for a financial reason, never to feel bad about that. I mean, that is the world that they're given. And again, euthanasia is such a gift because it is such a painless and a peaceful process where, a family can have those last few moments and know that their pet has not had to suffer in the decision. In those final breaths that they have, they can rest peacefully and as a family, they can feel like they have made, a good decision for their pet.
For those out there that may not know the process, could you do a brief overview so that the first time that they're hearing it?
How I do it?
Yes, please.
Because there's a few different ways to go about it. And when I'm speaking, I'm usually speaking more about cats and dogs because there is a difference with large animals. They sometimes have a different process that we don't use in cats and dogs. But for a typical cat and dog euthanasia, we place an IV catheter. And the reason why that can be beneficial, at least in my practice, is we have really a strong comfort knowing we'll have great access to that vein throughout the entire procedure. Because some of the medications we use can cause low blood pressure. And if we're struggling to find a vein again after, maybe we've used one medication, it just makes the process longer. And it maybe is not as comforting to the family.
Sure.
So, placing an IV catheter, I always tell family that's the worst part, and that's a little pinprick to the pet. It's not painful. It's just more the awkwardness of having an IV catheter placed. And then through that catheter, I'll usually use an injectable medication that makes pets a little bit sleepy and definitely causes them to be relaxed because we don't want anyone to have anxiety. And a lot of family members come in already anxious about the procedure, and their pets can pick up on that dramatically.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we help them feel more comfortable and more relaxed, the pet, and then the family usually feels relaxed as well. And then when the pet is finally settled and the family feels like they've had enough time, I use the medication that is actually, it's an anesthetic medication. It can be used and was used in times prior as an anesthetic. But it's given at such a high dose that it leads to slowing of the pet's breathing, and ultimately it causes their heart to stop. They're fully asleep, though. That's the beauty of it. There is no way for them to pass away until they have already been in a deep sleep. So it's very much like anyone that we would, wish good things for, passing peacefully in their sleep. So the animal passes peacefully, and then I always, I listen for their heart rate to make sure everything has gone according to our plan for that pet. And then the family can choose to stay longer. And I always warn people, and sometimes this gets overlooked and can cause some discomfort. It's important to know that animals don't close their eyes when they've passed away. It's just an unfortunate part of eye control is that most animals pass with their eyes open. And so some families, I can think of a few instances where that has been very upsetting. So I try and warn people ahead of time just so they're not surprised by that. And then, sometimes they lose control of their bowel or bladder. And I tell people too, like that it's very normal. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, and not to be surprised. And then, there are so many options for aftercare, and sometimes it depends on where you live in the country or the world. But, we often talk about cremating pets here in the United States. There are options, as you have in front of you. You have your pet's ashes saved. And some people like scattering their ashes of their pets in special places.
Right.
There's so many options.
Burying them, you have to be careful about the laws, and certain animals you can, certain ones you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to, I'll be honest, I try I'm biased here as well. I do try and talk people out of the process of burying their pet unless they are more than prepared. I did make an attempt to do this once myself and realized it's very difficult in some parts of the country to dig in the ground. But you need to really realize that pets need to go as deep as people, unfortunately. And so unless you're prepared to dig a hole approaching 6 feet, it's very unsafe because that pet can be toxic to other animals that might find them.
Good point.
You know, I can think of, in particular, we think of other animals that scavenge and poach. And so, you know, we wouldn't want something to happen to, you know, say bald eagle populations in a particular area, or other animals like coyote or wolves or things like that. So I try and tell families, you know, it's not the best thing. If they really want burial, I, you know, advocate for cremation and then burying the ashes, because that's not going to pose any threat to other wildlife.
That's a good point. And, you know, I really appreciate the fact that you've gone over in such detail the process. And the reason why I had asked you to do that today is that most of the time, the first time that we hear about this is when we're having to make that decision. And, you know, I know that our brains at that point are at a very heightened state of stress. And so we're not going to be able to hear it. It's not going to layer in or be absorbed in the same way. And so if people are able to hear it now, it just, I think, will help when the time comes for them to make those decisions, to know that, especially, you know, with folks, veterinarians like yourself, that this is the process and it's not that scary. It's still very, very sad. Nobody likes doing it. And yet it's going to be familiar because they've heard it. So thank you.
Agreed. Yeah. I think it's always good to have a little bit of knowledge going into it, and then obviously asking the veterinary team, because there might be some nuances to the way everyone does it. I'd say for most of the veterinarians I've worked with have done it the same way. You know, and a lot of facilities now have special rooms so that it doesn't feel so sterile and hospital-like. So families can really have time to mourn and grieve as they need to.
Sure.
And then there's a huge movement now for euthanasia at home, done in a similar manner, where veterinary professionals can come to individuals' houses and either after a period of hospice care or as they see fit, come and do the euthanasia at home, which some families find more peaceful.
Yeah, and I love that idea. I'm so glad, again, that we are being just so much more compassionate than we ever have been on how to make this easier on everybody involved, and especially the pets, because none of my pets have ever liked going to the vet, and, you know, no offense, it's just a thing. They're poked, they're prodded. It's one of those. I did want, if you could just spend just a short period of time, what it's like for you having to euthanize.
Yeah, you know, it's something I take very seriously and try and make it as personal as an experience as I can with every family and every pet that I'm presented, you know, with these questions. You know, I always think back to when I lost my cat Tiger. Unfortunately, it wasn't under a situation where he was euthanized. And I think back on it, and I really wish I'd had the opportunity to alleviate his suffering sooner, and make that decision. So I really take it very personally with all of the families I work with. But it can be difficult. You know, we talked about this as we were preparing the other day, that, you know, if let's say I've worked with a pet for many years, and now I'm faced with, you know, this end of life decision for them, and helping the family through it. It can be, again, very much like losing a friend.
Right.
Even though I know I'm doing it always for the right reasons, and that's something that has really helped me personally cope with this task of euthanizing pets, is making sure that I'm okay with it, and that I'm doing it, you know, for the right reasons to really help alleviate the suffering in that pet, and that the family is prepared.
Right.
Because it can really weigh on the soul after a while.
Sure.
Especially if you have, when I worked in emergency medicine, sometimes there are many pets in a day that have to be euthanized.
Sure. And I would
And it could be a lot.
Yeah, no, I would imagine that's why just like in so many other fields, self-care is extremely important. I'm aware that we are at the end. Dr. Patterson, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your schedule to speak with me and to share your fount of knowledge on this topic. And I could talk to you for forever. So thank you so very, very much. And yeah, I just appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yes, that is my hope. For the rest of y'all out there, next month we will have another Solace show, the first Monday of the month, August the 6th, and stay tuned to find out what that topic will be. All right, y'all have a great 4th. Bye.